Pace bene, dear friends, we are celebrating the 800th anniversary of the death of St. Francis of Assisi. I'm standing in front of the Lateran Basilica and also a statue of St. Francis and his friars. You know, this year, Pope Leo has declared as a Jubilee year, giving a provision of indulgence for the faithful, which means any Catholic or any believer who visits a church named after St. Francis and also any Franciscan ashram church will benefit from this special privilege. Now, a word about the Lateran Basilica. You know, this mighty church was constructed by Emperor Constantine after the painful centuries of persecution of Christianity. This is called the Mother Church of Christians. Up to 16th century, the popes used to stay here, and that was the reason why Francis and his companions in the year 1210 came to visit Pope. There was a motive. The purpose was to get approval for his new religious community that he started. And it's an interesting story. When Francis came and his the disciples came to meet Pope Innocent III, he was not that pleased to give a permission to this poor man. So he said, "You can go and preach gospel to the pigs." Francis, ever faithful to the church, following literally the command of Pope, went and preached to the pigs. And that night, Pope gets a vision. His church, the big basilica, is falling down. And that is being shouldered by this man whom he met in the morning and sent him to preach to the pigs. So that created a lot of tension, and next day morning, Pope calls this poor friends from Assisi and grants them the permission to establish. And that a symbolic expression you find in this statue built here. It's one of the oldest monument of Francis in a very original fashion here. Why Francis is popularly known as the second Christ? I used to wonder why St. Francis is called as the second Christ. Because being Christ is a big thing. It's not a small thing. Comparing a human being to a size of Christ. When you understand the life of Francis, you understand the real meaning of it, because he was enveloped in the love of Christ crucified. When you understand the life of Francis, you find him in the initial years of his conversion. He was in San Damiano. San Damiano was not a big pilgrim place at that time. It was a forgotten place where an old father known as Peter lived there in total isolation. You know, Middle Ages, the culture and situation was totally different. That time, bishops used to be living like emperors. They had their own army, and they were also very poor priests. And Francis was living with this priest. And that touched Francis very much, and therefore he wrote in his testament, "Christ gave me faith in priests." And then secondly, this image of the crucified in San Damiano was a very powerful image that touched Francis. In fact, we say that crucified spoke to Francis. And Francis was so much influenced by the crucified Christ. And second aspect of his conversion was his embrace of the leper, and care and concern for the poor, the lost, and the last and the least. So these are two dimensions of Franciscan vision, which I would say brought him to this highest level of being the second Christ. He was so much filled with the love for Christ, and at the same time his unconditional care and compassion for his brothers, the last one, the leper. So when you understand the life and the mission of Francis, he was following the gospel literally. And that is why preaching peace became very foundational, because from the inception till the resurrection, we find the message of peace. This is not a message of peace, but rather it was the life of Christ. And that was the biggest gift. And Francis was so much influenced by that. Maybe also, I would say, the context in which he lived. Assisi was in the midst of fight and conflict. So St. Francis also got involved very much in the issues of his time. For example, he went to Arezzo to bring an end to violence in that city. He sent his brothers in advance to prepare way for him to involve in Bologna, at the end of which the whole city became so peaceful. And afterwards you find a big example of Francis moving to war zones in the year 1219 September, in the middle of Fifth Crusade. You know, he went there leaving the whole responsibility of the order to other friars. And there he meets Sultan Malik al-Kamil and he brings peace there. Of course, he could not end the war, but that created a new history in the church of church's relationship with the Muslim world. And still, at the end of his life, we find Francis on the deathbed almost. And he came to know about the conflict between the warring parties of bishop and also the mayor. He sends two of his friars to sing a stanza on reconciliation, which became the last but one stanza of his famous song of the Canticle of Creation. So dear friends, Francis has set before us how to live in peace filled with the love of Christ and how to express that peace to the whole world. And that is the reason why Pope Leo constantly reminds us, invites us to follow the example of Christ, spiritually renewed in our commitment to Christ, and be witnesses of that peace which Pope mentions in his prayer, being unarmed and also disarming others with the power. So he was so much touched by this violence and war. So he told us, he says, you know, pace bene, peace and good to all. He says, this is a vision God revealed to him. And this is one he asked his friars, go and preach peace and penance. Penance means not doing some penance, but it is transformation of your mind and heart. And they started to live a gospel life based on minority, living in fraternity in utter poverty. You know, these became foundational elements of Franciscan living. I think today the world is so much isolated, so much after power and money, so much into fighting. It is in this context, Pope Leo calls to the attention of the whole world the life of Francis, declaring this as an year of jubilee, an year in which indulgences are offered, because Francis attained a mighty level of reconciliation with the God, reconciliation with the neighbor, and reconciliation with the world. And dear friends, this is a moment for us, not only, you know, you will get definitely indulgences on this particular year, in this particular year, which will be concluded in 2027 October. During this period, if you visit any church named after Francis or any Franciscan church, and you make a confession and you participate in the Eucharist and receive communion and pray for the intercession of Pope. Along with that, Pope reminds us to be renewed within and to be committed to the cause of peace. So this is a call for us, as he made a beautiful prayer at the end of that letter that he wrote. He says, praying to Francis, Francis, you who 800 years ago went to meet Sister Death as a man at peace, intercede for us before the Lord. You recognized true peace in the crucifix of San Damiano. Teach us to seek in him the source of all reconciliation that breaks down every wall. You who, unarmed, crossed the line of war and misunderstanding, give us the courage to build bridges where the world raises up boundaries. in this time afflicted by conflicts and division, intercede for us so that we may become peacemakers, unarmed and disarming witnesses of the peace that comes from Christ. Amen. Dear friends, on the occasion of the 800th anniversary of the death of Francis, there is a golden chance, an opportunity for all of us to visit the tomb of Francis. This is going to be opened for the first time after his death, and the public can visit and venerate the remains of Francis from February 21st this year up to March 22nd. And this is an occasion for us to intercede to Francis for all our intentions. If we are not able to physically come over here, let us offer our intentions, all our needs through the powerful intercession of Francis. May he continue to intercede for all of us. God bless.